So, very warm welcome. I'm Holger Nils Pohl, and I'm 36 years old, 3 children, and I started my career as a concept designer in 2009 after having studied communication design and doing an apprenticeship as a carpenter. And the story evolved somehow, and nowadays I do visual strategy facilitation, mostly focused on strategy and new business models and business model innovation. And in this kind of work, I always see that on every level, personal, business, management, whatever, it helps to be able to communicate visually. Because sometimes you have an idea or a concept and you want to try to get it across, and somehow you can't explain it properly and the other person doesn't understand it. And if in the moment you take a pen, it makes it a lot more easier, I think. Today we will focus a little bit more on, first, the basics of working visually, and second, on how to apply this to Scrum, especially, as we are here at the Agile Leadership Day. So, want to apologize for the only English-speaking people here in the room. The book that I gave you there is just in German, so it doesn't exist in English. So feel free to take it with you anyway. But I took the chance. So here are a lot of German people too, and then hope you like it. It's an experiment of mine. So let's start. There is one important rule for you during this workshop, which is that you try to copy as much of the drawings that I draw, right? So I want you to take action, to see how I draw things, and then to try to copy me right away. So you have the papers on your place as well, and you have a small set of pens. So just for explaining how I would use these kind of markers. So these are the smaller ones compared to the ones I use, for example, on a flip chart, which are slightly bigger, or the middle ones like flip chart and A3. But these are quite okay for working on a small piece of paper like you have in front of you, or a sketchbook. And I normally use the orange one that's called outliner for black outlines. It's a permanent ink based on water, so it doesn't smell, which is quite important for us as we work all day with pens and markers, and we're not getting into sniffing things. So it's and it doesn't bleed, so you can work on paper and don't have to fear that the wall afterwards is like black cluttered. So that's quite nice. And what is nice too is that you can draw above this marker with color, and it's not smudging away, so it stays clean and black. So that's the outliner. And then you have 2 ones that are quite not too easy to master, but they are the best ones in the small version. They have a brush tip, right? So you can experiment a bit. The gray one is for drawing shadows, which I explain later. And the orange one is just a random color. For me, it's like the best color. If I just give one color away, I would give orange because it's a nice contrast to black and gray. That's why it's orange, okay? So, having said this, I would start first with some science that you don't have to draw, actually. And afterwards, I jump into drawing and exercising, because I think it's the most important thing is that you get to draw things here. But first, some science to like return on invest on when you're using visuals. And if you're wondering, just for the sake of it, I'm working on the iPad here, and I'm connected to the projector, so I can draw big enough, because I figured out if as many people as you are now coming to this workshop, I have difficulties to show everyone what I draw on the flip chart. That's why I switched to the digital version. So in 1969, a man called Dale considered like how it would be if you present the content in different ways to students, and how they might remember this content, and when do they remember it better, or even not so good. So he had a first group of students, and this group had to sit down in front of a paper with written text. It was just a random article about something. And the question was, they should they should read the text, and they should try to remember the text. And after 3 hours, and after 3 days, they would write a test, right, to see how much they can remember. And there was a second group, and they had the, let's say, the pleasure to have a nice presentation with verbal words and some slides to see what's going on, to explain the content, the article, the content of the article. And this group had the same challenge afterwards. So after 3 hours and after 3 days, they got challenged on how much can you remember. So what do you think? How much could the first group remember after 3 hours? How much of the content in percentage? How much? 50%? 30%? Yeah. 70 is a good one. So actually 70%, right? Which is quite okay. What would you say the second group with the verbal and visual presentation? 45? 90? It's 80%. So to be honest, it's not that big of a difference, right? So 70 to 80%. If I was an advocate for working visually, that's not the big argument here. So we come to 3 days. What do you think? First group, just reading, after 3 days. After 3 days, how much? 40? 30? 45? It's 10%. And the second group, I make it easy for you, 65%. So that's a big difference. If you think now of your team, like management team, your employees, you have a strategy session, and you present the idea of the strategy, or you co-work and create this kind of strategy, actually you want them to remember quite a lot, quite 65%, because they want to tell perhaps the strategy 3 days afterwards to another colleague, and not only 10%, right? So that's one thing that undermines my hope and theory that it really helps to visualize things. So as I said, like I try to keep it short in terms of science. I want to just jump into how you can use the drawings, and the framing here is that I try to first get you an idea of possible icons. So how can I draw this, and that, so that you have an idea of how things looking. How can I draw them? And in the second step, we can think of like how could I take this into practice in Agile teams or Agile leadership, right? So this is the moment where you might want to start copying me. I basically use the same pens. I just have the Apple Pencil, but I use outlines, shadows, and colors. And I do just a short version because we don't have too much time. We have 10 minutes spent now on this one. And I think we will spend the next 20 to 25 minutes on the basics now. If I'm far too quick for you, please not raise a hand, but shout at me because I don't look at you too much. And I will try to slow down a bit. So the first and most important thing in terms of working visually and putting your text into a more visual appealing, for me personally, is using text containers. Because a lot of you can write probably and note-taking or doing on a flip chart note-taking and stuff with words. And you can easily turn these words and these pages into visual pages if you just use very simple, like that simple, text containers. And these text containers could be a rectangle. It could be like 2 rectangles on the side here, like I draw here, right? It could be as well a circle. And it could be as well like a pyramid scheme, right? Like this one here. And therefore, I want to just, only for this exercise, I want to go to the flip chart because this is quite important. If you work on a flip chart later on, or on your paper on the table, if you see how I draw things, when I draw a text container, I normally draw one line, another line, and close, right? I nearly never draw it in one stroke. right? So I just stop shortly after one line and then the next and then the next one. That helps me to be a little bit more precise, because if I am in a stressful situation, like talking to you, for example, while a training, and I would not draw line by line, sometimes my containers look like this, or even worse, something like this here. And there is a level of ugliness in your drawings that then doesn't help. You can draw very ugly, and it's quite good, but this tends to be too ugly somehow. And the same is when you see me drawing circles. And this applies to even small circles on your paper. You might see that my hand and my fingers are not moving at all, right? Only my arm moves, right? I don't move my fingers. I don't make something like this here. I don't move my hand as well, right? So I just move my arm, and I can do this in the small and tiny version as well. And if you try to do this yourself, you will see that your circles might improve over time. It's not a no-brainer from now to then, but if you use this technique to like just quickly sketch a circle without moving your fingers and your hand, just the arm, it helps you to have nicer circles. And don't take care of closing the circle, right? If you're working visually, like visual thinking and spontaneous things, you don't have to close things. It's okay if they are open. It's quite okay. So what we can do with these containers is that you just draw them around your text, right? So you have some bullet points, and you draw the rectangles around them. Or perhaps you have a pro and contra, like this here, vice versa. You want to create a ring binder, you just put a spiral in the middle of the rectangles, and you have kind of a ring binder, plus minus, or something similar. Perhaps you just want to, you can do the same with you can create a pie chart out of a circle. And already there is one symptom that is trainers and facilitators here in the room will know the effect. So it's quite difficult to talk and draw in parallel, because it's like taking too much energy for the brain to do both in parallel, especially after the lunch break, actually. So if we see these kind of containers, I sometimes like to add, for example, this small pin needle here, this one here, to just visually adjust or be a little bit more playful on the page. Or, for example, for the normal rectangle, I quite often tape it on the paper with just some strokes, right? Like this here. So that's the first version of text container, so to say. Quite quickly, quite easy, but I think already you can see this appears to be visual, even if we didn't draw anything else than strokes, some strokes, not too complicated. And then there is another thing that I do quite often as text containers, that is the speech bubble, right? From comic, you as comic readers might know them. And speech bubbles, I have to show you the analog way to do it just for the second here. I always start with a V, with a small V, and then I draw the speech bubble the same as I would draw a circle kind of thing. I start at the left end here and end at the right end, and I try to just make it quite quick so the speech bubble is a little bit smoother, and I don't care if it's closed. I don't care. It's even better if I don't close it, because it's more dynamic and people think I like, he's cool, he doesn't need to close the speech bubble, right? So let me do another one here as well. I closed it, sorry. And then I sometimes, just for the sake of creativity, or for example, I like to display more emotional, human-like communication in the round speech bubbles. And I like to use a rectangle speech bubble, for example, more for facts and figures kind of stuff. So I just draw a rectangle with the V underneath to have a rectangle speech bubble. And then I would say the third that I use quite often is a thinking bubble, which starts with a quite small kind of bubble here, and then like this. My thinking bubbles are always looking a little bit like dynamic curves. It's up to you how you want to draw it. It could be all the same size of the curves, or it could be a little bit more dynamic. It's just a matter of how you prefer to draw it. And to finalize these kind of text containers, I want to show you one single flag container that's quite powerful to create like nice titles on a flip chart, which is I just draw two quite long lines. If you're not trained, you should first write the title and then draw the lines, by the way. So you have this quite stretched rectangle. And then I'm adding one line on the left hand here that's parallel to the long lines. And then I try to draw this kind of form which I don't have a name for in English this here. And very important, I make it big here. Very important is this place here, right? You see that I did draw a longer line than it should be under this to create the banner, because if I zoom in here more, I now close the gap with this stroke here and a 90-degree here. So that's quite important. I show it in full here again, right? This creates this kind of folded banner-like optic. It's always a bit tricky to get it in the first time. I like to fill it out with my black, so it gets more 3D effect. And then you can write the title in it, and you have a nice starting point of a page. So what do we need more to make it more visually appealing? I would say the shadows and the colors. When it comes to shadows, I always imagine sun in the left upper corner of my drawing. So my sun is always shining in the left upper corner here. And this is with every page and every drawing I do, and the sun strokes are quite parallel over the whole picture in this kind of diagonal thing, right? So, and what this creates is shadows on the right side and underneath everything. And that's my mantra when drawing shadows. It's on the right and underneath, right? So let's do it. For example, with the first poster here, it's on the right and it's underneath. And I even shadow out the tape sometimes. And the same goes for my ring binder, on the right side and underneath, on the right side and underneath. The same with the circle. The circle starts at somehow 2 a.m. if you want to, or 2 p.m. It does make it at 2 o'clock, and it ends at 7 o'clock. So the shadow goes here, like around this here. With the pyramid, it's always a bit difficult. I just put it underneath. With our new banner, is right and underneath, and underneath, and underneath, and right. And with the speech bubbles, there's something different, because the speech bubble, I think of a speech bubble that's kind of in a volumetric form, right? It has something like a body. And that's why I draw the shadow inside, which I feel makes them more bubbly, seeing whatever. But it's the same, it's right and underneath. I don't have to think twice about how the shadow goes, it's always right and underneath, always the same thing. So you will see that your shadow drawing will make up a nice drawing even if you messed up the first lines. And then I take my colored marker, which is the orange in your case, and if I have the page like this that I did draw here, I just take away my sun here. Then I would sparely use colors, but I like, for example, to color the tapes of the papers. Just the tapes or the pin needle, right? Or perhaps the outer part of our banner here, like this here. So like this. I wouldn't use much more of a color. Sometimes Or why I use the color in the tapes, for example. If I draw an additional container here, let me see, like this, a small container, and I'm adding some strokes again for more tapes. What you can do quite nicely if you have another color, let me take just the blue for the sake of the demo, and I use the color blue for another container that directly indicates something, that there is something different to the others, right? So I can, for example, say like one topic is everything is orange, and if I have another topic on the page, I give it another color, for example. That might help, right? So I hope you see that with these very simple text containers, you already can create a very visual page. And then there is, of course, more. There are, on the one hand, arrows, and on the other hand, icons. So let me first start with the arrows. Arrows are very important because you show connections, relationship, and everything. So what I normally do is I draw the simple arrow with a closed point, so that I can, if I want to, fill up the arrow with some color. Even if I draw them quite small, I use the same technique, and I would add some color as well. You can, of course, play around with some line strokes. For example, let's say you can do the dotted line. You can do waves. You can do even draw small circles, which is taking up a lot of time. You can make it edgy. All these kind of ways, or you could give it another end, right? You could end with a circle, or you could end with a square, as you like it, as you prefer to do it. So you can go crazy. To be honest, I almost always use only this arrow. I never play around, but that's my personal thing. Of course, you can play around as you want to be creative. I'm not so creative when drawing live or presenting something, so I just stick to the easy arrow. What I definitely do sometimes is I create a much stronger arrow. Therefore, I draw two parallel lines, and then for explaining how to best draw this kind of arrow, I draw a gray line here for explanation. I have to have a 90-degree angle here, and then I draw in the middle of it here another stroke. So that's my guiding lines. Why do I do this? I have my two lines here for the beginning of the end of the arrow pointing area, and then I know I have to end on the middle line here. So that's how I help myself to create a nice looking arrow. I not always draw this kind of structure, of course, but if you have thought about it a few times, most likely you create a nice arrow. And it is quite important for me always to first draw this version of the arrow, right? So this version, because only then I know roughly where to end with my tip here. Then there is a very sophisticated arrow, which is 3 lines, and people will like you for it. It's only 3 lines, and then you add 2 arrows to the 3 lines. So you add 1 arrow here, and 1 arrow here, and you have a nice, right? So especially when you talk about co-working, co-creation, good communication, back and forth, and all this kind of stuff, this arrow might help you quite a lot in your work. Of course, you sometimes have to draw, for example, a circle and then an arrow, which is not so convenient, but sometimes you need it. People always ask me about the recycling arrow, which is normally very complicated, but I try to make it easy. If I draw first these 2 lines, and I duplicate them here and here, so I don't try to draw the round edges, just edgy ones, But if you draw like a pyramid that's cut it in the middle, and then you have your recycling arrow nearly finished, right? Like this. So that's how I draw the recycling arrow without having the problem of drawing round edges and stuff, which is not too easy, I think, to get it right. And one last arrow for you here is more like a sign, which is sometimes on a crossroad. So you draw, I mostly draw 3 above each other, like this here, and then I give it a stand, and then you have something like a crossroad arrow, right, that you can use. For example, if you draw this very big on your flip chart, so like flip chart format or something, you can draw on it like a guiding system or topics of the workshop or whatever, so writing in it quite easily. So these are like the most kind of arrows that I use. In terms of coloring, so you can, for example, fill the big arrow just with color, which looks quite nice. I would then only color, for example, one of the 2 arrows in our magic arrow with the 3 lines, like this. And the same goes for the crossroad arrow as well. And I think you have to get used to your brush pen there. Hope it works out roughly. Seems so. And last but not least, in this case, the shadows, right? It's again right and underneath. So every tip of my arrows gets a shadow, which makes them appeal nicer, like this, and this here. So at the end, I think you have a quite nice looking page with arrows, and yeah, looks good. Okay, to just rush forward. Good to go? Yeah, nearly there, nearly there. Yeah, some people looking down and up. Okay, good. I'm just jumping forward. Then what you always have especially in Scrum, different types of people, right? You have to draw some people because it's about human beings. A lot of people are drawing stick figures, but there is one way to draw people even faster than with a stick figure, which is you draw the head and the body, and that's it. So that's a person. I think we saw this in Pete's presentation already today, so who took care here. I think they had arms as well, right? I normally, if I'm really fast and in facilitating mode, I even skip the arms because it's too long to draw sometimes, right? Yeah, it depends, right? When you prepare a presentation, you might create a little bit more detail, and when you're in a conversation, a workshop, you might just skip more details in terms of your drawings. But this is even faster than a stick figure. And of course, you can create, for example, quite fast here, a team, right? A team. If you want to have a diverse team, right? You might diverse team there, like this. You decide who's the squarehead. This is a diverse team. And if you then want to have quite a lot of people, like a crowd, you just draw a lot of heads and a lot of curves here, and that's it. So you have a crowd of people. And this is a basement where you can play quite nicely with. Especially because you now know, for example, the speech bubbles. So if you draw 2 people that are talking to each other, you draw 2 speech bubbles, for example, and you have an overlap, and all of a sudden you have, like, say, I don't know, common language, for example, or good communication, or we have something in common, or whatever. So you can tell quite a lot of things just with these kind of speech bubbles, right? Good. So I don't want to show you the. I show you the. Let me say. I show you the complex version of a person, but don't feel bad if you don't get it now, because normally we spend like 2 to 3 hours on just training the persons to draw. But if someone is here who likes to see it, I think for the sake of it, I will present this as well. So this is the easy version. And let me just finish with some Scrum persons here. Because, for example, if you draw this, let me do it big here. If you draw this easy person and you give it like this stroke, and perhaps the stopwatch here, you have a Scrum Master, right? So then there is the difficult one, and I didn't show this Zorab already, so might be, let's see if it works, but this here is my new product owner. Because he's a square head. One thing, yeah, normally it's a crown, right? But we have a big problem. If you talk to anybody else who's not knowing Scrum, a person with a crown is a customer. So I always feel like, it doesn't work. So product owner with a crown is nice on the one hand, but we need something else as a product owner because everybody else is a customer in here. So we can discuss this. This is a work in process product owner. And then, of course, you want to have, for example, these guys with the tie, which are managers, all kind of thing. Perhaps the manager has a rectangle head, I don't know. And of course, if you have a group of stakeholders, you might have more tie people here. So like this, right? So this is like a vocabulary for Scrum people in an easy way. The dev team normally I draw it with the just 3 people, right? So we have the dev, and we have the master, and the product owner, and the customer, and the stakeholders, right? So now the complex person, or the more difficult to draw person. What I do here is I first draw something like a square head, but I use slightly rounded lines, so it's a little bit more dynamic, right? This is the head, and it's already have a pointing direction where he looks to. And then I draw a shoulder that's roughly the size of the head, which is quite unusual for a normal person. And then going down just some slightly dynamic strokes, so give it a light curve, so it doesn't look like a robot. And then you can play with the arms, which are basically 2 lines, like this. And for example, sometimes I don't know what to do with the other hand, so this hand quite often has like laying here in the back. And then there is a thumb here and a hand like this. If you think too much about it, it looks quite not good, but it does its job very well. And I normally skip the legs because there are quite only a few scenes and things you need the legs for. But with the hands and some speech bubbles and stuff, you can make like 90% of situations. And if I draw this more complex person, I would add the shadows as well here on the inside, right and underneath. Same goes for the simple persons if I have time, and so on and so on. I'm skipping a little bit and jumping a little bit forward because I have the time in mind. And then, for example, filling the person with the orange. Orange works quite well with persons as well. So like this. Good? Okay, your heads are down. Let's just wait for another second for you to finish up. I mean, the coloring is just nice to have. You can color it later on like a coloring book. So, now that you have the persons and the text containers, let me tell a short story in which I integrated some icons as well that I think are quite helpful on a regular basis. So the story will fill up like 1 page in landscape format, right? So let me see. Prepare this. And we are like, yeah, we're good to go. We have 9 minutes still. So let's say you you have an idea, and I draw you with the square head here. So you're the guy with the square head, and you have an idea. Therefore, I draw a light bulb. Right? Something like this. I like to draw the light bulb this way. Perhaps you have your own way to draw light bulbs. And I think this idea is really worth that I tell this to someone else, perhaps a peer in the business or a friend outside. So I move to my friend, so me and you as the square head with a friend with a round head. And we have a chat with each other, and we see that we have something in common because we like the idea, both like the idea, right? So that's how we do it. And we think like, oh, you know what? We should need, or we would need, a third person in our team. So let's see if we find a developer, right? So we build a team. We, for example, in terms of Scrum, we build a Scrum board. Right? Just a few rectangles here. And we think, thinking bubble, we think that this might work. Okay? So far, so good. What is the next step? In Scrum as well, in other business units, we have to talk to our stakeholders or customers. So let's say we have a customer, and we have perhaps a stakeholder on the same table, who knows? So we draw first our customer, then our stakeholder, and then the round table, right? And of course, we have to interview them. So we're asking, hopefully, good questions. And therefore, we learn, and we try to build some software. So here is a screen for you. And this is quite fast, isn't it? Here is a screen for you. So we build a new part of the software, a new interface or something. Perhaps we put it down to an app. So this is a smartphone. Smartphones, by the way, are mostly displayed in portrait format. If you do it in landscape, it's more like an iPad. And of course, if we did that successfully, we scale this up globally. So this is our world, roughly Europe and Northern and Southern America or something. So I like to draw this Saturn curve around it to make some more movement appeal here. And finally, if we did this right, all these kinds of things, talking to customers, stakeholders, developing our product, we might build up, running out of space, right? It's not too. So we will. I don't know. Do we provide slides of the conference, Sorab? Yes. So you will get every drawings I did here anyway. So so this is a building. So everything you put a flag on is normally a building, right? If it's not a ship. And ultimately, and this is something you might need as well, we want to earn a lot of money, right? So in this short story, you see like 12 to 15 different icons I use all the time, again and again and again. It's all the time the same. People think I'm very creative, but it's actually, yeah, what should I say? Talking about writing, I have 4 minutes left, and you see it's quite fast here. I try to draw in capital letters, so capital letters, the title in as bold as I can, and I'm not a good person in terms of usage of font, right? I don't use a lot of typefaces, so I just write as I write. It's much easier for me, for example. That's why I say like as bold as possible with the title. Sometimes if something is important, I do this double line thing, right? I do one line doubled, as you see here. Make it bigger. Important. So if I only have one pen, this is a way I can like make it a little bit bolder or more important kind of thing. And what I like is I use some color. Like you have the brush pens, so it's quite a little bit more difficult to write with them, you will see. But I use some color to lay focus, right? And this is basically it from my side on typefaces. So when you say like you have a black and another like lighter color, like orange, and you use the double lines and bigger and smaller, normally you can do like 95%. Yeah, question mark is, so my question mark, so sometimes when I have written this kind of text here, and I would say, sometimes I then, oh, it's the wrong color, then I would draw the exclamation mark, for example, that big, so I have a framing for the text, and I could even say I give it a shadow if you want to, right? Shadow here, oh, not good. Shadow. And the exclamation mark is, for me, the clearest one is this one here. So let me see at the time. So we have a lot of things covered now. All right. You have the choice, because I can't tell you everything at once here. I could tell you a story about routines and habits, or I could show you a very quick sketch of the whole Scrum process. What would you like to hear in the last 2 minutes? Routines and habits. Okay, that's more than half. Good. So, this is something you actually, I think you can't draw. You just listen to, okay? Just relaxing at the end of the 45 minutes here. So I'm thinking a lot about how to improve people's performance in business life in terms of implementing more visual tools, which is not only about drawing, but about thinking of how could we use more visual tools in terms of my eraser is here. How could we use more visual tools, and how could we change our behavior and thinking habits? And therefore, I came over the fact that we all have to carry our baggage with us. And this baggage is kind of our routines and habits. So this is a metaphor for our habits, right? And how are habits and routines built? It's built when we're a toddler, right? With our parents. When we go to school, right? We are influenced on college, of course, making our diploma. A very strong influence is, of course, by our friends, right? At a beer, at the bar, like, you know this shit over. And then, of course, our wife or friend or whatever. Very influencing on our behavior and how we act, how we think, how we decide. And you can literally think of it like you are influencing your brain, your connectivities of neurons, and you're building like highways in your brain. So all your decision making, behavioral acting, and habits and routines are like highways in your brain. Actually, highways in your brain. Every time you try to do something new, like implementing some more visuals, for example, into your process, it feels a bit like this guy here, right? In front of the big forest with the small tools he has in hand. And me, for myself, it's the same. So sometimes if I feel, and you will feel the same, like, goddamn, I throw away my tools and I go back to the highway. It's quicker, right? It's convenient. I did it all the time, right? Bad weather outside, I don't go for a run and stuff. But on the other hand, you will see when you take the effort and create these new trails through the wood, you will kind of end at the real thing, right? The real thing, you will have the feeling like, perhaps after this workshop, hopefully already, you think like, oh, this is easy, right? I could do it, and this and that, I have an idea how to do it. And And you know, if you do it the other way, like only talking, blah, 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 in meetings and stuff, don't facilitate stuff, and so it's like feeling that you are not at the real thing. It's like a coulis, like a theater kind of thing, right? And the thing is that this is normal, and the thing is that I know you will end up again on your old highways with the big logistics and cars driving and silk. They will drive there for years, right? For years. But when you get into this habit of creating something new, trying new things, changing how you do and act, you might feel better, you might perhaps perform better, or you might just have, I don't know what, better life. But on the other hand, if you once start with it, you will see that it's not only the rainforest, you will have the Sahara tour and the Arctic and everything else too. So it will never stop that it might be, there will never be an easy way to do something new. So I will want to encourage you to think next time when you think, I could draw it, but no, it's too, I can't, just think of the highways and perhaps you try to take the trail instead. So that's from my side. I hope you enjoyed the workshop and have a nice day. For those who don't want a coffee break, they can stay, right? Then I will show the others free to leave now, okay? So it's official end. So you don't have to stay. So what I do here is I'm working on the iPad and having my app. So it's the app that I brought to market, the Work Visual app, right? So what I have here, for example, with the story, this one is created in another software, but I have different layers in my drawing application here. So I have my already finished drawing lying underneath a white piece of layer, which I first fill, so you don't see anything on the screen. But the opacity of this layer is at 99%, which is quite nifty, right? But I see some gray lines here on my iPad, which can't be displayed on the projector, on the screen. So I actually know where I have to erase the lines so that they somehow appear parallel to my talking, right? So that's how I do a lot of presentation, because I can prepare everything quite nicely. And if I switch, so now I have the mode that's called follow on the right hand. That's called follow. So you see everything I would do. So you see my layers, right? You see my tools and everything. But I can switch to the full, that's over there too. And in that moment, you only see the screen with the drawing on it, but you don't see my tools and you don't see my zooming. So that's, for example, how I have now been switching to the gallery, searching for another picture that I have prepared, but you don't see it. So I just talk while I'm searching and pretend I'm just doing nothing here, but I'm searching for the new picture, and then I'm jumping into the next picture, and I can present it again with the erasing effect. So it's basically just a white layer up front, another one, and I'm just erasing it. What I did with this short story here, with that one, right? That one was prepared as well in the background. So the blue lines here, if I take them here, put them around. So they were there all the time, and I just traced them. So I had them at 1%, right? I had them at 1%, and what I did is, when it feels a little bit, let me see, it feels a little bit like, for you, like, I see roughly something like this here. So you see slightly the blue lines still? So what I did is, I didn't have this one, I didn't have this one, right? I had another layer on top of my hidden lines, and then I zoomed in here for the idea, so it was that big. And then I said, like, let's this guy have an idea, and then I just draw the idea, right? And I'm just tracing bit by bit my drawing. So I actually know how big it is and where it is and how to draw it. I don't have to think about it. But you don't see it because the projector can't display it, and I'm in full mode, so you don't see me zooming in. So I'm always in, and still, when I draw this person here, oh, it has a square head, I think, in my iteration here. So I'm in zoom, I'm drawing that big, but you don't see it because I'm in full mode. So I'm just tricking you. right? But this is how it helps me presenting even better than before, because you can prepare your slides and you can draw and right. What you actually can do is you have this small button on the top, which is a small picture, the third from left here, and you could like load your text files as a picture. So what you then would build is you have the gallery here on the side, right? And you would have like a picture slide that's prepared, and the next slide would be some text files that you imported as a picture, but you can't animate them. So it's not working with a clicker, for example. You have to do it manually then. You can create a video. In the app, no video. No, you have to implement it for now. So there will be a visual library where you can and the library function where you can drag and drop things, right? That makes it easier, perhaps, for example, during a presentation. But actually, it's not animated then. It's recording everything you do, but it's not like showing off the undos. So if you make a mistake and you do undo in the video, you won't see it. And one more special thing is, let me see if I have something here. For example, a lot of people think for example, if you see this picture here, right, which is quite complex, what I created here. But I did this on different layers, and here's the pencil sketching missing. Let me see. Here was another one, I think. 1 second. Here. For example, this one here. This is a book review, right? How I did this is I did sketch it with a pencil, right? So this is actually, let me see. So this is actually my pencil sketch. So I did a pencil sketch and did the drawing and stuff. I did take a photo. I placed it underneath everything, and then bit by bit, I just created the picture on top of it. So I don't have to think twice about proportions and stuff. You can do the same for a video. So you sketch your drawing for the video, make a photo, place the photo here, and then you trace it in the right, in the right order for the video. You exported the raw file from the app to the exporter, which is for free on the Mac. And then you can say, I don't want to see this layer in the video, so you deactivate the sketching layer, and you only have your clean video file. So that's how you can create videos quite nicely. And then you have a raw file, right? That's a yes, exactly. You have a raw file that's called work visual. That's storing everything, the raw data. So we have a double-sided engine. So you're drawing in pixels on the iPad, but it's saving vector data as well. And then you can first blow up the thing, quite huge, and it takes everything in recording what you draw. But it ignores the undos. So if you make a mistake and you do undo, it's just as you didn't have done it, right? For now, we need an extra tool for that. That's called the exporter, which is running on the Mac. But we're working now on taking it into the iPad. But it's a very complex process, and for now the iPads couldn't bear it, right? Yeah. So enjoy the conference.